Labour MP Damien Egan for Bristol North East was due to visit Bristol Brunel Academy, but was cancelled. Yet the way in which the media has spun this story would lead you to believe this is another case of anti-Semitism, as Egan is Jewish. The Times ran a story with this headline: "Anti-Semitism in plain sight must meet full force of the law. The case of a Jewish MP banned from his local school underscores the continuing threat posed by the most ancient of hatreds in Britain." The Telegraph, they ran with this: "Bristol shows where dangerous multiculturalism can lead." Now, those were more overt examples, but this headline again from the Times is more subtle, but just as poisonous. Jewish MP banned from school after pro-Palestinian campaign. So is the school anti-Semitic? Well, if you took the media at face value, then you may well believe that. The important point the headlines miss is that he's vice chairman of Labour Friends of Israel, which puts into perspective that last headline. Now, it could have read pro-Israel MP, but they decided to use Jewish MP. Now, let's take a closer look at the first article. It was supposed to be a routine visit to a constituency school for Damien Egan, the Labour MP for Bristol North East. It turned out to be anything but. In September, Mr Egan was abruptly banned from entering Bristol Brunel Academy, not because of any fault on his part, but simply because he happened to be Jewish and vice chairman of the group Labour Friends of Israel. Now, I love how they gloss over that. Oh, he just happened to be vice chairman of a group that advocates for a state committing genocide. I mean, you don't just happen to be, you choose to be vice chair. A very deliberate and conscious decision. Let's continue with the article. "It is nothing short of disgraceful that Mr Egan was barred from carrying out a basic duty of an MP. It is shocking also that some parents of children at the academy threatened to keep their children at home should Mr Egan's visit go ahead. Unsurprisingly, members of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign played a role in blocking the visit." The NEU, Britain's largest teaching union with more than 450,000 members, must urgently examine the extent of anti-Semitic agitation within its ranks and sanction members who were responsible for Mr Egan's inclusion. The ugly reality is that Mr Egan was targeted purely because of his religion and stance on the Jewish state. Had he been a Russian, he would no doubt have received a warm welcome. The incident is just another example of the discrimination suffered by Jews in Britain. This manifests itself in different ways. The decision of West Midlands Police to ban fans of the Maccabi Tel Aviv football team showed how hardline elements in the Muslim community in the region were able to drown out the concerns of the local Jewish community. Now, no surprise that the attention has turned to so-called sectarian politics of the Muslim community. This was echoed by the Telegraph. What we are witnessing is the importation of foreign conflicts into British public life, not as distant matters of foreign policy, but as emotive causes that override local norms and institutions. When Jewish public figures are singled out or treated as proxies for a foreign conflict, the consequences are deeply troubling. At the heart of this incident lies an abdication of civic authority. Institutions are no longer prepared to assert their authority in the face of organised pressure. Cancelling a visit is easier than confronting protesters, but every such decision emboldens those who believe that disruption works. A diverse society can only function if there is a shared commitment to common civic norms. When imported grievances begin to override these norms, and absolutism replaces pluralism, the social fabric frays. Britain has long prided itself on accommodating differences, but accommodation cannot mean institutional paralysis. Well, that's very interesting. Maya Roston, who wrote this article, seems to think that importing foreign politics into this country is a bad thing. Yet, who are the most sectarian of all? The Zionists. I mean, we have lobby groups that advocate for another state. We have Labour and Conservative Friends of Israel. No one complains about sectarian politics there. Kieran, I find it really hard to believe that given everything that's happened since the 7th of October, that these arguments are going to work. I'm not sure if people are going to buy it. What's your take on this?
Well, first of all, it's a very important story. So I'm very glad we're covering it. But in the end, Curtis, it comes down to something quite simple, doesn't it? This is just a very transparent attempt to try and reheat the old conflations between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism that were so potent and powerful and indeed career destroying in 2018, 2019, particularly 2019. And you're right to highlight October 7th as something of a watershed or a Rubicon moment, because since then, the power of that, the value of it, the utility of it has massively, massively declined. It's diminished. And it's diminished for very obvious reasons, which is that people more than ever can see that the state of Israel is a state, that it acts as states do for instrumental purposes. And in this case, it's committing a little thing called genocide. And in those circumstances, trying to hide behind the conflation of Judaism or Jewishness with Zionism, I would submit becomes much less effective. So that's the first thing. We're in a kind of, Nietzschean sort of eternal return state of affairs with politics and discourse generally. And it's very clear that this is a very faded attempt at taking us back, and fool us once, and by us I mean the sort of left or the liberal left, fool us once, shame on you, fool us twice, shame on us. And actually, I'm very happy to say that, knock on wood, so far, the left, by and large, hasn't bowed to the kind of pressure that it did previously bow to in the context of the attempted conflation of the state of Israel with all Judaism and Jewishness. So that's a positive thing. So yeah, I think in answer to what you're saying, it's certainly not going to work anywhere near as effectively. And another point about all of this, I met Damien Egan once when he was head of Lewisham Council. I had no idea that he had anything to do with Labour Friends of Israel. There's a very, very easy test, isn't there, for this kind of thing? If a Jewish MP went to Bristol or any other school and was not a member of Labour Friends of Israel and had not gone on record defending or acting as apologist for a genocidal state and was barred from being there, then of course that would be anti-Semitism and we would all line up to condemn it. It's a very, very simple test. It's one that they will never agree to submit to or participate in because they know they would fail it. They being the Damien Egans and his outriders in the media and Starmer and all of the others who are baggage handlers for the Israel lobby and trying to confect a fraudulent scandal out of this. That would be a very simple test, wouldn't it? And it'd be one that they fail. But it's not one that any of these quarters want to pay any attention to because, as I say, they know what the outcome would be.
I mean, I want to get your view on the right-wing media and this new layer of what we're seeing when it comes to the conflation of anti-Semitism and criticism of Israel, is that it feels like that, and in tandem with what we're seeing as right-wing forces condemning multiculturalism. It's a now mainstream idea that multiculturalism is somehow failing. And many parts of the media are trying to explicitly tie this to the pro-Palestine movement. It feels like this is a proxy to Islamophobia. What's your view on this sort of new condemnation of multiculturalism whilst linking it with people's views on Israel-Palestine?
Well, first of all, the way that the internal logic of each of these kind of dimensions operates makes sense. It I think makes perfect sense that they are gateway drugs for each other. That makes perfect sense to me. There is a kind of logical coherence there on their part. I would say, in a way, Curtis, they're clutching at straws. It might not seem like it because they've got so much muscle. And they do have a lot of muscle. And, they are able to influence powerful institutions way more than we are and way more than the pro-Palestine movement with its multitudes and its tens and hundreds of thousands and indeed millions around the world. We haven't yet managed to capture institutional power, certainly not in this country. So it can distort and amplify the actual levels of power that I think that they have. They see that Israel's soft power, so-called, on which it relied for so very long, its cultural hegemony, is waning. It's receding rapidly, and it has been receding particularly rapidly since October 7th. And so, of course, they are, relying on methodologies which previously they weren't entirely reliant on, or even, majority reliant on. Getting the Telegraph and the Times to do their billing. The Telegraph and the Times have always been comfortably pro-Israel, but this degree of kind of agitprop and this degree of sort of arson attacks on public figures and this kind of wall-to-wall conflation of anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism, whether it's more or less effective now post-October 7th, for me, it reads as a symptom of the decline of Israeli soft power and Israeli cultural hegemony around the world. It's kind of a sign and symptomatic of desperation, in my reckoning.
Yeah, and I'd see certain figures when you think of Tommy Robinson, for example, who's doing a lot of work for Israel, so that works in tandem for his views on Muslims, and it's a proxy, I feel like, for some people on the far right, that Israel is a bastion of Judeo-Christian values, and then, let's be honest, white people, in order to attack Muslims. But I agree with a lot of what we said. Do you want any final words before we move on?
Just very briefly, I mean, look, in the 1920s and 30s, British society and the right and the upper class is absolutely rife with anti-Semitism. There's no question about it. And the Balfour Declaration, as much as anything else, was a reflection of that. It was an expression of anti-Semitism. The goals of Zionism, the goals of anti-Semitism were broadly the same. Get the Jews out, put them in one place, get them out of British society as far as those upper-class anti-Semites were concerned, the black shirts and so on. The realignment around Israel, again, it makes sense now because Israel is a very successful ethno-state. It's a very successful apartheid state. And of course, there is a great deal of colorism involved and white supremacy involved in all of this as well. Israel is ruled by white people, essentially, in a part of the world that for a very, very long time, or forever, was Muslim and brown. And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense that there's been that kind of realignment. Those that were vehemently anti-Semitic in the 1920s, 30s, their kind of their successors in the far right are now arrayed with Israel for those reasons.